My name is Sauri, and which means small lily. And so when you forget my name, then you can call me Lily. And when I came to the United States, it was like 27 years ago, and I couldn't speak English very well. But I went to study at the Western Theological Seminary, where I met my husband, Abraham. And the first day at the seminary, I went to the bookstore because I had to buy textbooks. And I bought books. And as I was leaving the bookstore, I said, "Thank you." And the person at the register said, "You bet." And it's like, "What? Excuse me, what did you say?" And he said, "You betcha." And that was very confusing to me because it's like, this is in English that I have learned, and maybe I'm just, I don't belong to this place. I don't know anything. And that was 27 years ago. And now I feel like when I come back to this Calvary Reformed Church, I feel like I'm home. And so many of you say, welcome back. And I feel that way. Because I belong to here, because you are sending us to Japan. And you can tell that I'm Japanese, because I don't look like Dutch. But the thing is, I think, when I'm in Japan, I feel like, yes, I'm Japanese, I belong to these people, but at the same time, I belong to you. Overall, because I belong to the family of God. Exactly. So I'm, so happy this morning that I can introduce these 6 pastors coming from Japan. They just arrived on Friday night. And they are still in jet lag, so they are very afraid that, that they might fall asleep. But they are fine, and they are very happy to see you too. And I want to introduce a little bit about, what kind of country Japan is. And I brought this PowerPoint presentation, so you can go through this. And first, what do you think of Japan when you hear about Japan? This is the Shinto shrine. And maybe next picture, do you think of ancient religion and culture? Or next picture, do you think of bamboo forest? That Abraham thinks that's fascinating. Or next picture, do you think of crowded cities? Next picture. Oh no, it's not coming? Okay, you can skip some things. How about, do you have a picture of squid, eel, and octopus? Maybe you don't want to see, that's why it's not there. Oh, it's coming here. We eat them. But next picture would be more familiar. How about this, right? And next picture, Japan is small rural communities with traditional values. And also, next, Japan is large cities with a mix of modern and traditional. And next picture, Japan is natural beauty. It's Mount Fuji. And also Japan is, next picture, a nation which takes pride in its traditions. And when we see the next picture, then that Japan is a nation of people who live fast-paced modern lifestyles. And Japan is 127 million people, but only 0.8% Christian. Did you know that? So if we ask Japanese people what your religion is, you hear sometimes in religion in Japan, Buddhism, 92%. And Shintoism, 85%, Christianity, 0.8%. But some people say, even 72% of people say, oh, I'm an atheist. I don't believe anything. And you can tell that this is a very secular nation, secular country, that people don't have anything but themselves, that they have to feel like I have to work, I have to do the best because I got only me. So the value system is very different there. And for example, religion in Japan, what is this? The next picture you can see, it's like a big church. However, this is a secular wedding parlor. And most weddings are performed in a Christian style in Japan. But next picture, what is this? This is a Buddhist cemetery. Over 90% of Japanese are buried in Buddhist cemeteries. And the next picture, what is this? This is a Buddhist cemetery for unborn children. 1 out of 4 pregnancy in Japan terminate in abortion. And next picture, the suicide in Japan is very high. Because you can tell that if you don't have one true God who loves you, who created you, who cares for you, and if people don't know that, if people don't have anything that God, then they don't really find themselves, the true value in themselves. So the Christians in Japan, which is only less than 1%, has to strive to spread the gospel to this 99 stray sheep all by themselves. And it's hard because if you are surrounded by that majority who have a different value system, how can you be so strong? You feel like you are lost. You feel like you are strange and different. So this is very important for me and for Japanese Christians and Japanese pastors to be having fellowship with you. It's important for you to pray for us. I want to show you a couple of pictures how Japanese Christians are. And next picture, this is Abraham and Sauri working in church. And next picture, it's like this, we are playing music and singing. And next picture, this is a picture of the church that I'm from. You can see the white building, and that's my church. And that you can tell the size of it because you can see the car parked there. So this is very small, and you can see that this is a picture of the group of people, and this is called Koga Church. And women from the, left, in the second left, in the front row is my mother. And this is the only church member that they have at this church. But they are happy, they are smiling because they know that I'm taking picture of them, that I'm going to show that to you. So they can see you. That's why they are smiling. And next picture is a rural church in Aomori. One of the pastors, he took us there. And they don't have worship service on Sunday because they can't afford to have a pastor. They have only 3 members. So they are having a Thursday worship service. The pastor is commuting to worship there. And next picture, and she's one of the members. So if you see her, you remember the small church with 3 members and you pray for her. And next picture, this is a kind of flyer and poster that one church in Shizuoka that was calling us to be a special guest speaker to a worship. So they gave away 10,000 flyers to the neighborhood. And we had a huge turnout. Next picture. This is it. But this is a double size of their regular worship size members. And the one lady standing right next to Abraham, this is the first time for that lady to come to a Christian church in her whole life. But this is happening, and the lady who is sitting on the right side in the front row, this young lady is a pastor, and she is pastoring 2 small churches like this. And she is smiling, and she is striving to just be there. And next picture, this is a women's guild gathering from the 10 different churches. And they are looking at you, and they are smiling at you. And I want you to remember that as you are sending us to Japan, you are praying for them because we are the physical form of your prayer, being there. So this is your ministry. It's not like we are sending someone to Japan and someone is doing something there. It's not like that. You are there through me. That's why these Japanese church people are encouraged when they see me because they see you through me. Missionaries are not special people. We are not special, charming people or anything. But we are very special because of you. And they know that. So I thank you so much that you've been supporting us for the last 20 years and you are praying for them. And remember that they are praying for you too. So we are united and we are connected in Jesus Christ. Thank you. Okay, can you stand up, the man? Say your name.
こんにちは。My name is Etsuo Toya. Came from Japan, Chiba Prefecture. Neighbors, Tokyo.
Hi, I'm Hajime Inoue. I'm from Japan, Tokyo. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Motomu Osawa. Please call me Moch. I'm from Aomori City. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Yoshinobu Fujisaki. You can call me Yosh. Yosh. And now, Abraham belongs to my church, Kugahara Church.
Good morning. My name is Sachio Oshikawa. Please call me Sachi. I'm from Japan, in Tokyo.
Good morning. My name is Hiroshi Yagi. Please call me Hiro. Thank you. From Tokyo. Thank you.
Thank you.
One more thing. I want to take your picture, waving at this camera, because I will take the picture back to Japan, and as you are waving at them, the Japanese church people will see you waving at them. Isn't it a good idea?
In Luke chapter 10, beginning with verse 25, there's a story that we all know. Just then a lawyer stood up to test Jesus. Teacher, he said, what must I do to inherit eternal life? He said to him, what is written in the law? What do you read there? He answered, you should love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself. And he said to him, you have given the right answer. Do this and you will live. But wanting to justify himself, he asked Jesus, and who is my neighbor? And Jesus replied, a man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho and fell in the hands of robbers who stripped him, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. Now by chance a priest was going down that road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. So likewise a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, he passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, while traveling, came near him, and when he saw him, he was moved with pity. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, having poured oil and wine on them. Then he put him on his own animal and brought him to an inn and took care of him. The next day he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper and said, "Take care of him, and when I come back, I will repay you whatever you have spent." Which of these three do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of robbers? He said. The one who showed mercy. Jesus said, "Go and do likewise." I know this is a very familiar story to us. We all know the Good Samaritan. It's part of our English vocabulary. We use that word Good Samaritan all the time. But today I want us to relook at this story a little bit. It begins with this teacher of the law, expert in the law, coming to ask Jesus about faith in the Bible. Now you have to understand, Jews of Jesus' day took the Bible very, very seriously. And the Jews of Jesus' day and the Jews of today, if you ask them what is the most important part of the Bible, they'll tell you it's in Deuteronomy 6, verses 4 through 5. It's a section of the Bible they call the Shema. You hear, O Israel, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your strength, with all your soul. For the Jews, this is their prayer. They pray this at every meal when they eat. They pray this every time they gather on Sabbath for worship. They pray this every time they say goodbye to a loved one at a funeral. For them, this loving the Lord with all your soul, with all your strength, is the message of their Bible. But Jesus brought a new message. Jesus says, he took a verse from Leviticus 19 and said, the essence of the law is to love the Lord your God and to love your neighbor as yourself. And this whole idea of loving your neighbor was a new and radical idea. And so this teacher, this expert in the law, asked Jesus about this thing. What is this neighbor? Who is my neighbor? And he asked this because the Jews took the Old Testament seriously. And if you look at the 10 Commandments, in the 4th commandment, the commandment about the Sabbath, it says that you shall rest on the Sabbath, and not only you, but all the people that are living in your house, and all the strangers, all the foreigners that are living within your city gate. So all the foreigners that live in your town should also be allowed to have a Sabbath. But then you get to the last commandment, and there's this other word. It talks about that you shall not covet your neighbor's wife. So in the 10 Commandments, there's a neighbor, and there's a foreigner in your gates. And so the Jews thought these are two different kinds of people. And the Jews of Jesus' day thought whenever Moses talked about neighbors, that your neighbors were your Jewish neighbors, and that they were somehow different from the foreigners that were in your city. And I can kind of understand this. My kids are now both in college, but when they were in elementary school in Tokyo, they went to a neighborhood elementary school, and I became the PTA president of the school because I was, helping out, and somehow I got elected. Okay? Now, I ended up being on national news. Why? Because I was a foreigner, and I had become president of the PTA. You see, even though I'd been living in my neighborhood for 10 years, I was still a foreigner. I was a stranger in the gates. I wasn't quite a neighbor. I was a foreigner living within the gates. And so that was unusual and special and looked different. And in America, I think it's the same way. People who aren't really from the neighborhood are still foreigners that are in your gates for sometimes a real long time before they actually really become a neighbor. And so this expert in the law is asking Jesus, who is my neighbor? He's really asking a serious question here. And Jesus gives him this familiar story, the story that has become familiar to us, to define what a neighbor is. We know the story. There were two people who were supposed to be the examples of people who keep the Jewish laws. There was a rabbi, there was a priest and a Levite. And both the priest and the Levite, when they come down the road, they see this person who is beaten, naked, and half dead. And when they see that person, they walk to avoid him and go on their way. And why did they do that? Because when they looked at that person on the road, they decided, this person is not my neighbor. Because the books of Moses are very, very definite about this. When you see your neighbor hurt, you're supposed to help. But they made the determination that this person was not their neighbor, and they moved on. But there was a Samaritan who sees this person on the road, and it says that he had pity on him. The word pity on him in the Greek means that his stomach just ached. He was in pain inside. His insides felt like they were inside out. And so the Samaritan has pity on him and takes care of him. And then Jesus concludes the parable by turning the question around. When the expert in the law asked Jesus the question, who is my neighbor? The question was being asked as if I'm a person who has power and strength and ability to show compassion on others. So who is my neighbor that I'm supposed to be helping? That's what the expert in the law asked. That's the question. Who is my neighbor that I'm supposed to be helping? And Jesus tells him a story, and at the end of the story, he says, if you were that man, half dead on the road, which one of these three do you want to be your neighbor? When you are almost dead, who do you want your neighbor to be? The question is entirely opposite. And then when you're half dead, now you have to understand that road from Jerusalem to Jericho was a road that had twists and turns and went through mountains, and was a road in which robbers often would stop and do this very same thing. This was not one of those hypothetical stories that never happened. You've all heard those kind of. This is a hypothetical story that actually could have really happened. In fact, if you go to Israel today, there's an Inn of the Samaritan place that you can visit. Even though this story is just a story, someone made it in as if it was a real historical person. Because this kind of story is a kind of story that really could happen. So when this expert in the law heard Jesus' story, he immediately identified that, yes, that could be me. I could be that wounded traveler on the road. And then, who would I want my neighbor to be? On March 11th, 2011, Japan experienced the largest earthquake ever recorded in terms of seismology. It was 9.1 on the Richter scale. 246. And shortly after, there was the largest tsunami that ever hit Japan in over 1,000 years. And in an instant, 20,000 people vanished. And today, right now, there are 300,000 people who continue to live without a permanent home because of that disaster. And so for the past 2 years, one of my jobs has been coordinating the relief efforts for the church in Japan, for volunteers from abroad, for fundraising. I was there at the disaster scene just 1 week after. And I've never been in a war, but I can't imagine that a war scene could be any worse than how that looked right after. These huge concrete buildings flipped upside down. miles and miles and miles with all the houses destroyed. There were boats in the middle of rice fields. There were cars in the middle of the ocean. It was just total devastation. And here I was with my son taking food and batteries and toilet paper to people who could not get out because all the roads were pretty much destroyed, and there was no gasoline. You couldn't get gasoline. So we had to go and help people get the things that they needed. And one day, it was about 10 days after the disaster, Akio and I, my son and I, were driving the van that we had goods in, and we came across this area. It was mountainous, so that the houses weren't destroyed, but the people couldn't get down the mountain because there was no roads. And they were washing their clothes in the river. Now, I don't know if you've ever been to Japan or heard about Japan, but Japan, when it comes to like electronics, we have everything. So the washers and dryers are just amazing in Japan, right? So we don't see people, washing their clothes in the river in Japan. We see people have these really fantastic high-tech things where you throw the clothes in, they come out folded and everything. I mean, so to see, these kinds of people in rags washing their clothes in the river, it's just something you don't see in Japan. So we saw these women washing their clothes, and we stopped by and we said, we have food, we have batteries. And like I said, the thing that really impressed them the most was that we had toilet paper, because it was 10 days and they were using newspaper and afraid to think what they might have to use next. And, just like this Samaritan, my stomach was just turned inside out. And after we dropped off the goods for these women, we had a drop-off point about 1.5 miles away where there was an elementary school where we were taking all the food that we had that was going to be distributed from there. And I walked into that elementary school, and in the entrance there was a bulletin board with the PTA activities. Like I said, I was the PTA president for my kids' school in Tokyo. And I'm at this school that's 100 miles away from where we live, right? And I looked at that bulletin board, and it was the exact same bulletin board as our bulletin board at the elementary school in Tokyo. They had the same activities, the same kind of kids, photographs and smiles. Everything was exactly the same. And I just was hit that, wow, these ladies that I was just helping, these people in this neighborhood, before the disaster, before 246 on March 11th, they were living a life exactly like mine before that tragedy hit them. These people were far away, but they were my neighbors. Suddenly I realized there's no difference between these people and me other than that disaster. These people in Japan, not just people that had this physical, natural disaster, but all these people in Japan are your neighbors. They're just like you, except for the fact that they weren't born in your town. They weren't born in a place where there's a pulpit and someone is preaching to them. And so they don't know Jesus Christ. In Sauri's presentation, she showed how Japan has this crazy thing about religion, where 90% say they're Buddhist, but at the same time another 3/4 of the people say they're atheists. It's crazy. So I'll give you an example. One of my wife's friends from high school is a friend of mine on Facebook now, right? And when I talk to him, he tells me he's an atheist. He doesn't believe in God, right? So January 1st rolls around, and January 1st is a big religious kind of holiday in Japan. Now, I'm not sure, do they still have Dick Clark in America on New Year's Eve? No, he's gone. But anyway, they have something like that still where people are watching TV and it counts down to 0 and then Happy New Year. It's really exciting, right? Well, in Japan, they have this thing on New Year's Eve where like everyone's watching this show on this one station where they all these singers sing their songs. And the TV show ends at 11:50 on New Year's Eve. And then all of a sudden, the picture switches from this real happy, popular music show to a Buddhist temple. And then there's this big bell that goes gong, gong, to bring in the new year. It's not Happy New Year with also, no, it's this big Buddhist temple with a bell ringing, because people go to the temples and to the shrines to bring in the new year. It's a big religious holiday. All these people who say they're atheists, they crowd in to go to these shrines and temples to say their prayers and to get their little, I'm not sure what you call it, like Lucky Charms, idols, whatever, to bring home and give them good luck for the new year. So this friend I'm telling you about from Sauri's high school, he writes on Facebook, January 4th, I still haven't gotten to the temple yet to get my charm for the new year. I feel like my virus protection has worn out on my computer and, and I haven't renewed it yet. So this person who thinks he's an atheist, at the same time, he's feeling nervous about not having his lucky charm from the temple to give him what he needs to give his spiritual security for a year. And so this is how those weird numbers work. And then another way that weird numbers work is for my job helping with the relief effort, I have to commute to an office once a week. And in Japan, trains are amazing. In the morning it's really crowded, like this. And what happens every once in a while is the train can't come. Or say there's a delay, which is really weird because in Japan everything is always on time, but then there'll be delays once in a while. And the reason for the delay will be because on the train track, they have to clean up the mess after someone has just committed suicide by jumping in front of a train. These are your neighbors that don't know Jesus Christ. And without Jesus Christ, they have no hope. And so we're sent to bring these people hope. Today we have these pastors with us. And they're all struggling because the average congregation size in Japan is 25 members. And they're all struggling. And to be here, to come here, we always try to bring some pastors to visit our churches so that they can see that they're part of this big family. And so that as they struggle on their own in their small churches, they know they're not alone. You are with them. You are their neighbor so that they can be a neighbor to those in need. Because Jesus calls us to go and do likewise. And that is how we become a light to the nations. Let us pray. Oh, Heavenly Father, we ask that you teach us how to be a neighbor. We all know what it's like to be